Hi everybody, this is Burke Lyle. It's a Friday afternoon as I'm recording. It's hard to believe that it is the 15th of November already on this very day. And it's the eve of right now of Georgia versus Auburn, and that's why many of you might notice me wearing a Georgia hat today. Big game of football tomorrow at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And a lot of news went around this week. So I'm going to talk about 4 stories in this episode, including last night's Browns-Steelers game and what happened in that game. I watched a few minutes of it. I forgot what they said. But, you go on to the Stephen A. Smith show. You watch First Take. You watch The Herd. You probably watched the other show with Skip Bayless and Skip and Shan. I think that's what it's called, or Speak for Yourself, whatever. All the shows out there, Dan Patrick show. Sports talk radio in Cleveland, I'm sure they're talking about it. Any market, I'm sure this will be on the Michael Kay show later today. I'm sure Francesa talked about it. Either way, this is a national sports story. Browns Steelers. Not about the game itself. Since the game itself, I watched the entire game. I watched every snap. Basically what it was is the Browns had a few good possessions. Right? They had 2 really good possessions. That was it. Missed field goals, and the Steelers basically punted, or when they didn't punt, Mason Rudolph ended up throwing 4 interceptions in the game, and the Browns won 21-7. And watching it, I thought about doing a show yesterday, so this wouldn't have come up, but I decided to do a show today. And you know what? If you're somebody who's at First Take or any of those shows, sports talk debate shows or sports talk radio, not what happened in the game. Since what happened in the game probably won't be talked about outside of Pittsburgh or Cleveland. But what happened at the very end of the game, which is what I'm about to get to right now, is what could be talked about for days, weeks, perhaps months, even years. Since what happened in the game? So the game's over, the Steelers have the ball, and basically Mason Rudolph gets not sacked by Myles Garret, basically pressured by Myles Garret, is on top of him, and later on, basically what happens is they kind of get into a fight, they're kind of fighting one-on-one, and Myles Garret rips off Mason Rudolph's helmet, right? Imagine, so, maybe I can somewhat describe it. I'm sure all of you have seen the video already, some way or another, but just imagine this happens. So imagine this is a helmet, right? So Myles Garret rips off Mason Rudolph's helmet, and they kind of get into a fight, and Garrett has a helmet on, Rudolph doesn't. And basically, imagine I'm Myles Garret, and now pretend I'm doing a one-man creation of the Myles Garret and Mason Rudolph show, right? So I'm Myles Garret now. Now I'm Mason Rudolph. Let me do that again. That is what describing the action in this video, and they're much better. There are much better shows out there, right? Much better video. But what I did is just a representation. So what happened is Myles Garret ripped off his helmet, and he hit Mason Rudolph with his helmet. That's exactly what he did. And then it kind of started a brawl elsewhere, kind of a brawl, which, you see brawls all the time, right? In baseball, it's getting less and less common. There are benches clearing brawls. I think there was I think it was Pirates and Reds, I believe. They had a huge brawl over the summer. There's been brawls, right? And the National Hockey League, not necessarily brawls, but players. It doesn't happen every game. It's rare now, less common than it used to be in the National Hockey League. Players fight all the time. It is fairly common, actually. And nothing happens, guys go to the penalty box for 2 minutes, or usually 5 minutes. They both do it right. But what this might remind me of, since suspensions are severe, I knew Myles Garret was going to be suspended. I mean, if you eject him, it doesn't really matter. The game's over. I thought, give him 2 games, right? He is suspended for the rest of the year. And not only that, the year and the playoffs, which the Browns are unlikely to make it to the playoffs. Which, the last time I talked at length about the Browns 2 weeks ago and about kind of their underachieving, and yes, they've won 2 games since then. I think the main reason is, and we're not going to get much into this, this is not the story again, the addition of Kareem Hunt, which it seems like adding Kareem Hunt, so far they've won 2 games, which at the end of the day, none of this will ever matter. No one will care that they beat the Steelers. What people will remember will this game, and what this reminds me of is Malice at the Palace, which took place in 2004. And the NBA, that's why the NBA, you see players fight. There's basically zero tolerance towards fighting. If there is fighting, a technical foul there will be a technical, if not flagrant fouls, which who knows how long that'll take to sort out. And B, certainly suspensions. Well, Myles Garret, I repeat, is suspended for the rest of this year. And who knows, maybe into next year as well. Like when Malice at the Palace occurred, and Malice at the Palace, granted, was so much worse. I mean, this was players actually going to the stands, and the fans, unfortunately, was what would have been an ordinary brawl on court. Unfortunately, the fans had to get involved, and Ron Artest, who was at the prime of his career at the time, was basically suspended for the rest of that season. And that basically ruined his reputation. So the reputation of Myles Garret, I don't think will ever be the same. Now, Ron Artest went on to change his name to Metta World Peace, and he went on to win a championship with the Lakers about 5 years later. So I think his reputation improved. But right then and there, something like that causes a bad reputation. So Myles Garret coming to the league, and what his reputation was before that, I don't know for sure. I do not know Myles Garret at all. I've never met him. I do not know him. I've not heard anything bad about him. Too much bad about him so far. But now, all of a sudden, now, for what you'll be remembered for, what happened with Myles Garret? Elite pass rusher, right? One of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and was this year too. Now, after this, he'll be remembered for this. I think he'll be most famous for that incident. Since A, he got suspended for the rest of the year. So that's technically since they were going into this game, they're 3-6. So that's technically a 6-game suspension right there for Myles Garret, at the very least. And how far does it drag on to next year? Now, here's the thing. Myles Garret has appealed his suspension. I just skimmed through it very quickly. I believe what it says is under the collective bargaining agreement, he will hear back in 3 days. And I know in Major League Baseball, when you appeal your suspension, guys do it all the time, usually when it has something to do with brawls or whatever. And they play through it, right? Or A-Rod, during Biogenesis, got a 211-game suspension, appealed it, played the rest of that year, and then was suspended for all the next year. So yes, you can't, I know in Major League Baseball you can play through. To be honest, in the NFL, I am not sure if you can. I honestly don't know, and I should have. I believe you can, but I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look this up later. I'm going to say yes so far. So if Myles Garret can play and does play, then there you go. Maybe he loses a few games of suspension. But yes, that deserves a suspension. Since if he didn't use the helmet, fighting's one thing. 1 or 2 game suspension, fine. But again, and Stephen A. Smith made a good point about that. I was watching a few minutes of the Stephen A. Smith show. Mason Rudolph got off lucky. Since yes, he just got hit in the helmet and just kept fighting, but he could have been knocked out. And if he's knocked out, who knows what that turns into, right? I mean, there have been some severe fights, and granted, this shows how different the National Hockey League is in the NHL playoffs, right? Capitals, Hurricanes. Alex Ovechkin against the Shevnikov, I think, on the Panthers or Hurricanes, a 19-year-old kid in the playoffs, right? Challenges Ovechkin to a fight, right? Gets knocked out. There, big deal. That's just the way it is. I think Ovechkin, I guess you always get a penalty for fighting, but he got a concussion, missed 2 weeks, while Mason Rudolph was much more lucky, got okay and should be fine to play. It wasn't hurt at all, but he could have gotten a concussion or a bad concussion. So he was the lucky one. He survived it, which I have never seen that before. I have seen players fight, but I've never seen a player hit somebody with their helmet, which is what happened. And Myles Garret deserves a suspension. Is 6 games too harsh? Maybe a little bit. Rest of the season, I thought initially it'd be 2 or 3. Again, he's appealing, so maybe it will be dropped at 2 or 3. And other suspensions were handed out too. I think Marquise Pouncey was a major instigator in the fight. I think got 3 games. So again, it's just a brawl. And it happens all the time in football. Where guys punch each other. I don't know. Unsportsmanlike conducts are awarded, maybe 1, if not 2, and then that's the offset, right? Or a player gets ejected, whatever. This is going to be talked about, I think, for a long time. It'll be interesting to see what people remember. So I'm going to ask you this. Let's go down in time. So let's say my kids, or our generation's kids, right? I'm 22 right now. Let's say in 30 years I'm 50. And a 22-year-old I ask a 22-year-old, what do you remember about Myles Garret? I would say he was a great pass rusher and continued to be afterwards. But other people might remember Myles Garret from that famous fight against the Browns of someone who basically hit Mason Rudolph in the head with a helmet, which Mason Rudolph, who knows how good he's going to be. It could be that, let's say that never happened. Mason Rudolph, oh yeah, I'd say, oh yeah, he's a Steeler for the quarterback for the Steelers, backup, had an okay career. Other people like, never heard of him. Well, there you go. Mason Rudolph will be more famous. And so will Myles Garret. Now, if he makes it to Hall of Fame, who knows? He might be on that trajectory at the very moment right now. Then he will be remembered for this. But regardless, people will always remember him for this, especially Steelers fans. And does this ignite kind of a new rival? And they've always been rivals, but does this get any fiercer since looking at the schedule? They're going to play each other in 16 days from now. So are there retaliations? I mean, will there be fights? No, I don't think so. It's not the National Hockey League since the Red Wings Avalanche. You remember a series of brawls happened, and again, that was different. The league was different back then, but there are long-standing rivalries, right? So, what kind of retaliations happen? Will there be roughing the passer calls? Yes, I think there will. Will there be personal fouls called in that game? Yes, I think there will. So, the question is, who gets redemption? Since I think it would be unfair to take it out on Baker Mayfield, right? I'm sure the Steelers can't stand Baker Mayfield, right? So that would be an interesting question if that happens in 2 weeks. So that would be interesting. So now I want to talk about is Sean McVay's and the LA Rams, which again, so what I did is I watched coaches film of the Rams Steelers game, and come to think of it, that was a game that the Rams absolutely blew. They were 5-3, right? So in good shape, decent shape to make the playoffs. Now they're 5-4, and we'll talk about their upcoming schedule as it goes on. We'll get to that at the very end of this segment. So the Rams, I want to talk about what they were since Sean McVay, when he got to the Rams. Rock star. I use that word. I like to use that word a lot. Kind of a rock star-like coach. And for good reasons. Since you think about guys like Goff and Gurley, they completely retooled the offensive line, right? Jared Goff goes from a struggling rookie, looks like he has no idea what he's doing, to now, and rightfully so, he got his contract extension. So Goff is making more. I think he's going to make over $30 million a year on average annual value. I think it might be as high as 34, I think, starting next year, right? So McVay completely transformed the Rams offense. In 2 years, it went from, what are they? I mean, what are they doing out there? To basically Super Bowl favorites and very, very nearly winning a Super Bowl. So in total yardage in 2017, they were ranked 10th, but in points, first. Last year, yards second, points second. That's good. That's about as good as you can do. Right there, you're ranked very high in all categories, and that's total yardage. So that means they were very good at running last year, which that has dropped off. In total rushing yards, they dropped from 3rd to 20th. And then in yards this year, above average, above league average. There's 32 teams in the National Football League, and total yardage they're at 12, and at points, they're at 10, right? So that's above league average. But at the same time, what you're looking at is a huge drop off. So you go from very best in the league, class of the league. In some ways, you could say revolutionary offenses. You could say, even compared to now, the way offenses are going, like we remember this time a year ago, right? And it was commented in the article in the Ringer, which I'll comment on that later on in the segment. But remember that 54-51 Monday night shootout? Mahomes, Rams, we thought that was the new NFL, high scoring games. I mean, last year the league was all about offense, right? And we talked about how we thought that was the future of the league, and we said a rematch for the Super Bowl. And by the way, that very nearly was. The Chiefs very nearly won the AFC Championship game, right? So we very nearly had a Super Bowl rematch. But McVay seemed like an offensive, you can use a lot of words. You can say genius, offensive rock star, offensive savant. That's a word you can use. Those three words, right? It's again McVay going all the way back to his days with the Washington Redskins. Took over basically when Kirk Cousins, by the time he took over for RG3, transformed Kirk Cousins into, was basically a backup quarterback into one of the, and he put up big numbers. He was definitely a top tier of NFL quarterbacks, and this would be a whole story for another day. But the Redskins' lack of franchising him, right, caused him to eventually leave. And by the way, by the time, so Kirk Cousins worked with, or Sean McVay worked with Kirk Cousins for 3 years, including the first of the franchise tag years, including the year where they, in a really bad NFC East, where I think Romo was hurt that year. The Eagles were wildly, very disappointing team, and the Giants, they were just, I don't know, they were mediocre. They won the division bad, so they managed to win a really bad NFC East division back in 2015, and Kirk Cousins put together very good numbers in Washington, got his money in Minnesota, and as we speak right now, Sean McVay is chasing his old quarterback, Kirk Cousins, for the Vikings. That is one of the key teams that they are chasing, and the Vikings will have to lose and they'll have to win for them to catch them. So that's how good of a coach Sean McVay is, and we know how good McVay is. Yet, looking at the numbers right now, looking at that Steelers game, since that Steelers team, their defense was nothing spectacular. I mean, it was very good. You look at their defensive rankings, it's about of equivalent of what the Rams' offensive rankings are this year. Above league average, top 10, good for you. You're in the top 2/3 percentiles, right? So now I kind of want to comment on a few things I observed on the game itself. And the Rams' offense was terrible. Okay, they scored 12 points. Look at the score, 12 points. Here's how they got their 7. Here's how 9 of their points scored. All that the offense got against the Steelers was a field goal. That's it. That is it. So you're telling me, and this is not some Bill Belichick genius coach defense. This is a Steelers defense that is above a good Steelers defense. They managed to score just 3 points against them, right? Okay. So here's how 9 of their points scored. The Steelers basically did a terrible snap, went in the end zone. I think the Rams recovered a touchdown in the end zone. And then there's a safety. So that's how you get 9 of your points. 9 of your points come from things like that, right? So now, so the Rams, when they go on offense, you know what their response is? They punt their first 2 times. And what I observed with that, and what they were doing, is it's not like they were just completely 3 and out doing literally nothing. Okay, they were doing something, but it seemed like it's okay. Here's a good play, here's a good pass here. Oh, a good run here. Oh, here we go. We're at midfield, and then they just crash, and then they have to punt. It seemed like they had 1 or 2 good plays per drive, and then that was it. It did another thing that made things worse, which was the deciding point of the game. Minka Fitzpatrick recovered a fumble, and a strip sack goes and went about 43 yards for a touchdown. So that happens, right? That's something that should not happen. And just like that, that's basically the game right there. That's the whole turning point of the game. And on the very next drive, Goff comes out, 3 straight incompletions, nothing. And then another drive, Todd Gurley got a 9-yard run. Okay, first down, good for you. Okay, 1 yard to get a first down, 2nd and 1. And what they do, and this might be a classic example of what the Rams would have done, say, a year or two ago in 17 or 18, and what they did here. They couldn't get 1 yard. 1 yard. And they could not figure out again. And then, you know how sometimes they go for a punt, fake punt, they throw a pass and it works? Well, that was a disastrous interception. And it wasn't like, oh, it was a fake punt. No, they literally lined their punter up into a quarterback formation. So that's basically your, whatever it is, probably your 3rd or 4th string quarterback, not even a quarterback. So that looked bad. And then in the 4th quarter, after they have that safety, they have an opportunity to really take control of the game, take the lead. What happens? A punt. And you know what? The Steelers convert a 4th and 1 in their own territory. Kick a field goal. And then later in the game, 2-minute warning, they drive the Steelers 30. You know what happens? Goff throws 4 straight incompletions. So that happens. So they can't get anything going. And like I said earlier, when it seems like they do get things going, it just crashes. It doesn't continue. And they somehow got one last opportunity. Goff threw an interception. Goff ended up throwing 2 interceptions that game. So that all the offense, and again, as I said earlier, all the offense got was a field goal. That was it. That was it. And it's not like they're playing a great defense. It's not like they're playing the Bills or the Patriots defense. I wonder how good it really is after seeing the Ravens. That'll be interesting to see. Or a great defense. They're playing against a good defense, and they couldn't do anything. And it was against a mediocre Steelers team that they lost to. Right? On paper, the Rams were much better team going into the game on paper. And that's what happened. And Goff was... So his final numbers were 22 of 41, so better than 50%, but not much more than 50%. 226 passing yards, 2 interceptions, so that's what he did. And the Rams are now 5-4, and they lost a major opportunity, really, in the playoff picture. And it's kind of funny. Another interesting stat, it's not that hard to process. They lost more games now, already, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. They had 4 losses. You know how many losses they had last year? 3. I guess 4 if you want to count the Super Bowl. But regardless, they lost 3 games last year. And they were the talk of the league last year. I mean, one game they lost, I remember, was to the Saints in a complete shootout, right? And I know they lost to the Bears, which we'll get to that in a minute. So right now, their next game up is, and I think, did the league start to figure them out? Since they come to the Super Bowl, since the playoffs, they ran all over the Cowboys. Their offense had a good performance against the Cowboys in the divisional round, and then against the Saints, their offense performed quite well as well. Against the Patriots, it just disappeared. They scored 3 points against the Patriots defense, who a year earlier, to a backup quarterback, Nick Foles, in the Super Bowl, the Eagles offense just ate them all. Just really, you know what it was? It was the opposite, if you know what I mean. Doug Peterson outcoached Bill Belichick since his offense way outdid Bill Belichick's defense in the Super Bowl. Well, the next year, Bill Belichick outcoached Sean McVay. Maybe it's the guy the master, Bill Belichick, who was, you know what? He won his first Super Bowl as defensive coordinator, I think, when Sean McVay was a year old or something, right? With the Giants. So Bill Belichick knows defense. And that revolutionary Rams offense did nothing in the Super Bowl. And that's the great Bill Belichick. And this is a huge reason why Brian Flores is now the Dolphins coach. And I think he already was anyways. But that's why Brian Flores became a head coach. Games like that. And to the Rams offense changing. Here's a Ringer headline. I want to talk about that article for just a minute. I just want to talk about the highlights of the article. So, The headline, it was written by The Ringer. It was by Robert Mays. So it says, the Rams offense, magic, is gone. Their playoff hopes could disappear soon too. So is their magic offense gone? You know what? This happens in this league all the time. We make generalizations. Remember what I said earlier. Remember that Monday night game where it was 54-51. The Rams beat the Chiefs, right? We thought that was the talk. That would be the league, right? And maybe you can't do things forever. And like I said, right? Their offensive magic is gone. They had some good offensive games this year, but their offense is not the same. The numbers clearly tell that. You can look at that right away and clearly tell that. I mean, you could not watch a Rams game all year and you could tell their offense is down just by looking at the numbers. But I think that article headline is a generalization, since they can adjust. And they can adjust, right? So basically in that article it talked about what might have worked in 2017 or 18. Like that identical offense didn't work in that game against the Steelers. They talked about that and how Goff has been down. His overall numbers are down, which is kind of funny. He's going to throw for a lot of passing yards. His passing yards total is going to be high, well over 4,000, probably close to 5,000 at his current rate. But at the end of the day, his touchdown ratio, he's on pace to throw, maybe 20 touchdowns and maybe 15 interceptions, something like that. So, and then I also watched Sean McVay's press conference and basically explain what was wrong with the offense. And he did praise the defense. Yes, they did do a good job. They did do a good job in that game. And it's kind of interesting, by the way, in case you're wondering how good the defense has been, McVay in the McVay era in LA. About league average. Shown flashes have been good, but it's about average. This year it's actually it's a little bit above league average. So, anyways, McVay, and I saw in various articles, I think it was from the Orange County Register, I think it was the USA Today kind of Rams feed. I think it was called Rams Wire. It was McVay was taking blame, so he's doing a good job. And I thought he did a great job in the press conference. He didn't look too angry. He looked fine. He said, and he seemed confident for the future. He said, you know what? I think what I remember him saying a lot is they need to improve, and that was my biggest takeaway from the press conference. Is what they know what happened, they know what they did wrong, and they're just trying to improve it. And one thing that they didn't do, and I saw various stats across multiple outlets, is they did not give the ball to Todd Gurley anywhere near enough. Since Gurley played a really good game, he had 12 carries, 72 yards, but he did not have any carries in the fourth quarter, and he wasn't on the field for much of the fourth quarter. So I understand his load management. I mean, that knee thing started to bother him late in the year, and that was clearly a problem in the playoffs. But not giving the ball to Gurley, I think that was a problem, since he's their biggest reason why. And it's not only that, they're injured. Brandon Cooks, is hurt too. Has a concussion and may be out. He certainly is not going to play against the Bears. And their offensive line, which, again, the first couple years, like 17 and 18, when this all got started with McVay, their offensive line was a huge strength. They had one of the better lines in the league. This year, it is not the same. They've had a lot of injuries to their line, and right now, it's starting on the right side for them. It's kind of interesting. Right guard David Edwards, who is both of them are rookies. I think one was a third-round pick, one was a fifth-round pick. I believe David Edwards was a fifth-round pick. 9 games this year, 3 starts in the NFL, and Bobby Evans, who is appearing in just his 3rd NFL game. And first start, this was written by the line, and this was written by Vincent. The last name's going to be kind of hard. Vincent Bonsignor. Vincent Bonsignor. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Either way, he does a good job of covering the Rams for The Athletic, and I read multiple of his articles, including one of them, which was written about a week ago, before the game. It was saying the Rams, it's saying the Rams, if they want to make it to the playoffs, need to give Todd Gurley the ball. That's right. That's what he said. And you know what? The way they played against the Steelers, A, did not look like a playoff team, and B, if they lose games like they did against the Steelers, and they continue to lose games down the stretch, they're going to miss the playoffs. Since I talked about it a little bit in the last show, kind of when I was going through a rundown of of kind of the league and what was going on around the league, the Rams' disappointment, well, I decided to go in depth about the Rams, and they're 5-4, and they're in the same division as the Seahawks and the 49ers. That was a great Monday night game. So those teams, maybe now the Seahawks, well, one of them is going to win the division, another one's going to be a 5th seed, and is going to probably might be a favorite to win their wild card game, and there could be a rematch in the divisional round, or possibly in the conference championship game. Well, for the Los Angeles Rams, if they want to get into the playoffs, they're going to be a 6th seed. Since the loser of the West is going to be a 5 seed. And they're going to have to chase probably the Vikings. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a big challenge for sure for them to get into the playoffs. And they're going to have to make adjustments since who they're playing this week is the Bears, which this time a year ago, I think they're 11-1 at the time. Again, and that was just a few weeks after that super offense, right? And the Bears, that defense was really good this year, is one of the very best in the NFL. It was basically, that game was basically best offense against best defense. Maybe not literally, but about as close as you could get, right? It was basically, it's like in baseball, if you have this great starting rotation against this great lineup, who wins? Or whatever, or maybe what if you put, say, since they're relevant right at exactly the same time, you put the run and gun Suns against the Detroit Pistons defense that won a title, right? Best on best. That's what it was last year when they played. And the Rams had just 6 points and Goff threw 4 interceptions, so that Rams offense was shut down by a great defense. So that was not the first time we saw that. That was kind of a precursor to what the Super Bowl was going to be. And the Rams were well on their way to A, winning the NFC West, and B, likely securing a first round bye. Now they lost their home field advantage, right? So that's what it was this time around, and it's very different. So the Bears are 4-5. They managed to just barely beat a Lions team. Since Mitchell Trubisky threw for 3 touchdowns, but his overall the last week he played fairly well, but his passing yardage total wasn't that high. The Bears really didn't do that. Weren't very good on offense. They just had a few good drives, and they just barely lost to a Lions team without Matthew Stafford. I went through the condensed game of that game, and again, this is not a very good Bears team. This Bears team is significantly worse, and whoever loses this game is probably their playoff odds are going to drop. More so for the Bears, since they would be 4-6, they'd almost certainly miss the playoffs at this point in time, since they'd be chasing the Vikings, who are in the division, and also the Packers. And for the Rams, if they lost, they'd be 5-5. And if the Bears win, they'll be 5-5, and they'll own a tiebreaker over the Rams. So if they somehow get hot and the Rams get hot too, maybe the Vikings cool off, that could be a factor to watch for playoff seeding. Since if the Rams win this game, I think that it all but ends the Bears' chance of making the playoffs. At least right now, they'd have to win out. And for the Rams, if they lost again, the Bears would own a tiebreaker, and their playoff odds would be just a little bit better. While the Rams' playoff odds would drop dramatically, and they'd probably have to win out as well. So it's going to be very hard. And again, as I just said, the winner of this game his playoff odds will be better, but there's certainly no guarantees of the playoffs. So I want to take a look at the Rams' remaining schedule as we get ready to wrap this up. So they're playing the Bears Monday Night Football right before Thanksgiving. They're playing the Ravens, who the Ravens' offense looks kind of revolutionary this year. They're kind of an option running team. Lamar Jackson, the talk of the league right now. They're playing against one of the best Ravens teams in years. This is probably basically from start to finish. And the Ravens still have a lot of football left to play, but this is probably the best Ravens team from the start of the season to the end of the season since the Super Bowl team. No question about it, since other teams most of them since then were mediocre and really had to rally late to make it to the playoffs. There's no assurance of the playoffs, say, at this time of year like there was with those Ravens teams at the early part of this decade with Flacco. That'll be an interesting game. And could that be a potential shootout? Then they're playing the Cardinals. In Arizona, Kyler Murray, I mean, they could be vulnerable against Kyler Murray. And Cliff Kingsbury, a new offensive genius, which I watched, and this is a few weeks from now, things could change with the Cardinals. I watched the Cardinals. I watched some of their coaches' film. Now, I did not go deep in depth with it, but I saw some really nice throws. Murray had a few nice runs. There's some long touchdown passes. He's been playing fairly well this year. And Cliff Kingsbury looks like a good coach, at least offensively, right? So this might, and that's what they're hoping for. So that could be a potential shootout. And then you're playing the Seahawks, who, again, lost in a thriller in Seattle. In LA, you have to win those games, and then it gets very hard from there. So you have 3. And then after that, in Dallas, which that game could be very important. Since basically what the NFC East is, it's going to come down between the Cowboys and the Eagles, and the Cowboys currently have a tiebreaker over the Eagles right now. So again, it is possible that one team from that division will be a wild card, and possibly that game against the Cowboys could mean that whoever wins that game maybe makes it to the playoffs as the last team in, and there's no guarantee of that at all. The Vikings, by beating the Cowboys last Sunday night, really took control of the wild card picture of the playoffs. And that was a good back and forth game. That was a good game, but I'm not here to talk about that game, right? So that game could be big at San Francisco. This Rams team did nothing against the San Francisco defense, which is you can make an argument that's the best in the NFL after what the Patriots did against the Ravens. It's certainly a top 2 defense. That 49ers defense completely shut down the Rams in Los Angeles. So playing in San Francisco against a team that is, the 49ers are a much, much better team than the Rams are this year. I thought no way that would be possible at the beginning of the year. I thought maybe they'd have the role of the Rams, and the Rams would be kind of have that role that the 49ers or Seahawks have right now, and maybe the Niners maybe are a borderline playoff team. So they're probably going to lose that. And then you're playing the Cardinals twice. So that's kind of their back into the schedule. So the threat of Kyler Murray, maybe Cliff Kingsbury out coaching Sean McVay, and their offense just outperforming the Rams offense and the Ravens offense. So right now you're 5-4. So Bears, let's just say they somehow beat the Bears. Let's say they lose to the Ravens. They beat the Cardinals. They lose one of the games to the Cardinals. So let's just say they lose the first game. So let's just run through this rapid fire. So 6-4, 6-5, 6-6, Seahawks, Cowboys, Niners. Oh boy. So what if they go 8-8? They're missing the playoffs. So it's going to be a very hard battle since you're playing the Cowboys and Niners back-to-back on the road. Not to mention the Seahawks and the Ravens, the Cardinals twice, and the Bears. There are no easy games. There are no easy games for this team. Because I really think the Cardinals can beat them, and the Ravens certainly can. And the Bears, they have a good defense, a very good defense too. It's a little bit better than the Steelers. Not one of the best in the league, but still very good. The Rams are vulnerable. It is very possible that they go 8-8 or 9-7. In order to go 9-7, they'd have to just go 4-3 the rest of the way. 500 football. Or whatever to win 10, they'd have to go, 5-2. It's going to be a long stretch. It's going to be very hard. And there's no way this team is not winning out whatsoever. No way. So this Rams team. If I had to say today, looking at what happened against the Steelers and the outlook for the rest of the year, I'm asked this question: are the Rams making it to the playoffs? And that could be a good question to put out on Twitter. Are the Rams making it to the playoffs? I'm going to say no. I would vote no. I don't think they are. So if they don't, and we are in mid-November right now, what things look like, say, in New Year's could be very different. but I'm trying to project the outlook of the Rams from now all the way down the road to New Year's, right? It could be very different. So right now, I say the Rams missed the playoffs. And they could prove me wrong. I could be talking about them again in early January, talking about their potential playoff game. So I could be wrong. So I'm going to put a poll out and see what people say. So that's all about the Rams. So now, in other news, another big story that went around the league this year, and one of the biggest stories in sports, is what happened is Colin Kaepernick's back in the news, so what's going to happen is tomorrow, which is Saturday, is having a workout and attempt to get back into the NFL. So the question is, and this is set up, and not only this is set up by the league. The NFL is setting up a workout for Colin Kaepernick, which, reading some articles, this is not what Kaepernick asked for. You know what this league is doing, and I'll get to that. In just a minute after I speak about it, Eric Reid. But now, 11 teams are attending the workout as of right now, and that could be more. Who knows how many are? But that's about a third of the league right there. So for the first time, 11 teams will get a good look at Colin Kaepernick. And what Eric Reid said, and this is the exact words. This is from an ESPN article written by Eric Newton that I read. These are the exact words by Eric Reid. So, quote, "I believe it when I see it," Reid said Wednesday. "At this point, it looks like a PR stunt." This is from, end quote. So that's what Eric Reid said. So, you know what? And getting to Eric Reid in a minute. Eric Reid, obviously is a big supporter of Colin Kaepernick. During the national anthem, protested with Kaepernick during the 2016 season, has continued to do that since, and still does it to this day. And also in the article, said that Kaepernick is still a productive player in the league, and the league is trying. Okay? So Reid thinks Kaepernick can still play, and Eric Reid's one of Kaepernick's biggest supporters, and that's fine. So what he says, it's a PR stunt. Is it a PR stunt? You know what? I think it is, since here's my next opinion. This is my opinion. I think a lot of people are saying this. This is the league trying to do Kaepernick a favor after having not played since 2016. That's right. This is the league trying to do him a favor, since it's setting up a workout, and since teams can do their own workouts, but this is set up by the National Football League right now, the NFL. I think just to kind of, in some way or another, try to repay for what happened all those years later, right? So now, and this is my opinion as well, and from what I said, so his quality of play has declined. I think it did decline, right? Since again, if he performed at a high level, and the 49ers would have won more, I think he was their record when Kaepernick started that year in 2016 was 1-10. Now, it wasn't all Kaepernick's fault, not by any means, but still, 1-10. So when you look at that, again, had some good games, for sure. And but then was inconsistent, did not play, had one awful game, and had some bad games. So it was inconsistent, was not performing at a consistent level. And so teams around the league at that time, and that was 3 years ago, the league has still changed. I mean, you talk about starting quarterbacks then and now. I could do a whole episode on that. But it is very different, right? The league then was very different. I mean, that was pre-McVay Rams, when the Rams were terrible that year, along with the 49ers. Okay, so no longer viewed as a starter, right? And another thing, was part of a Super Bowl team and then a conference championship team. And they declined, and they not stay contenders. Since you look at certain things, right? And granted, I'm not saying that, and this was kind of how the 49ers were run. I think what it was, the reason why they're good, the biggest reason why they're good, defense. Their defense was dominant. It was one of the best in the league at that time. They had, I think their biggest strength at the time was linebackers. I think they had, remember Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman. Who else did they have? I think they had Ahmad Brooks, Aldon Smith, elite pass rusher at the time. They had 4 elite level linebackers right at the time. And also, it was Jim Harbaugh who completely transformed the 49ers. And he also worked with Alex Smith, and they won. And with Alex Smith for those 2 years, about a year and a half that he was there before he got hurt, they were winning. So they won before Kaepernick got there. Kaepernick kind of took Smith's place, and they continued the success. But when the team started to get worse, things started to happen. They got worse. Kaepernick could not keep the team in contention, and they became a terrible team. So, again, how many teams in the NFL have a quarterback where at one point they're great, and at one point they're terrible, and they stick with the same quarterback, right? So Kaepernick is not that type of player. Kaepernick, whose passing stats could struggle to get over 3,000 yards a year, right? That's what Russell Wilson was kind of early in his career. Now is an elite passer, and again, he was a really good runner when he came in the league. Still can run now, but Wilson's gotten better and better. When the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, it was the defense and running. It was not really him. He was just part of he was along for the ride and was a valuable member of that team, but he was not the biggest reason. If they won the Super Bowl this year, and I think they can, Russell Wilson would be the biggest reason why and the number one reason why, right? Well, Kaepernick, the reason why he did not get signed offer is, again, as I said this earlier, if this happened, if he decided in 2000, I don't know what was going on in 2013 or 14. Well, let's say he decided to start the national anthem protest earlier. He would have still been in the league, and it would have gone away. But I think just the timing of it, the Niners being a terrible team, and Kaepernick's inconsistent play, what that resulted in was the owner said, you know what? Your team's not winning. We're not going to sign you. So that was it. And sure, I think it was also the national anthem. I think it was both of that, and did a collusion against the league. No, but I think it's just the timing. Since again, let's say in 2013, Kaepernick all of a sudden decided to kneel for the national anthem, and said, "Why are you kneeling for the national anthem?" And so gave the same reasons as what was given then, and why it kind of became popular league wide. I think the height of it was 2 or 3 years ago, and has since declined. And now, you know what? For the first time since 2015, the national anthem is not an issue whatsoever. That's good. That's good for the league. I'm glad the league's finally behind it. And a few players may still kneel for the national anthem, but many, I think, high percentage, I'd say more than 99% do not. And even at the time, many players did not kneel. A very high percentage did not. Yet the few that did got the attention, right? And unfortunately, it was mostly negative attention. Right? So again, I want to ask how much, if you want to look at the 49ers in their peak, say 2011, 2012, when they went to the Super Bowl, I give Kaepernick credit for continuing the success, for taking over for Alex Smith, and big reason why they went to the Super Bowl. But at the end of the day, it was not all Kaepernick. It was not the quarterback. It was the rest of the team. It was a team effort. And when the rest of the team declined, so did Kaepernick. So did the team's quality of play. Out goes Jim Harbaugh. And all of a sudden, the Niners drop off. So again, Kaepernick is definitely a big part of why they're good, but was not the only reason. And could not, basically went down with the Niners. They decided to move on from him. Now, he should have at least been a backup. Should have been given an opportunity as a backup at the very least, right, on a bad team where maybe you compete against a starter or whatever. Should have been a backup. Should have been given another job. That's his thing. So yes, now you could look at the side of the collusion effort. Oh, was not given due to the national anthem. Yes. As a starter, no. Did not deserve to be a starter after. No. As a backup, yes, I think should have been signed, and I think should have been in the league overall. Which I was unfortunate, but what Kaepernick decided to do was, you know what? I think what he did was bigger than football, and that's why he didn't play in the league and was willing to do that, since he never had to do that at all. And obviously that's a two-way street. Freedom of speech. Oh, you can protest. Oh, freedom of speech. Oh, I'm the owner. I can say you're not allowed to do that. So it's a very complicated issue. It's not a problem anymore. That would have been a great thing to talk about 2 or 3 years ago. So now the question is, so it's basically going to be a league is giving them a workout. And again, as I said, it's basically to try to repay them and say, okay, here's your shot to get back to the league. We're going to give you every opportunity we have. We're going to let all these teams come. And it kind of came out of nowhere, right? It was not talked about for that long, but it just kind of popped up over time. But none of the other free agents are getting workouts set up by the league, since they usually meet teams usually on Tuesday, and it's usually team scheduled, not league scheduled. And there are plenty of other free agents where you look at their names were playing key roles on teams, say, 2 or 3 years ago in that time period as well, right? So will Kaepernick get signed? You know what? I've heard Kaepernick's still in shape, is ready to play football, has been ready for this moment for years now. But you know what? It's been 2 years, 3 years since last played the NFL. Teams have changed already. The league has changed. If I just say, I'm going to say no, that is my prediction, but I wouldn't be surprised if somehow I was wrong. So if I'm wrong, I will say, yep, I was wrong. I didn't think would be signed, but did get signed, since I just think so much time has gone by that I think it's time to move on. So let's change gears now. We've been talking about football. We've been talking about the biggest stories in football. Brown's story, everybody's talking about. All right, I turn on the First Take, any sports show, that's the first thing people are going to talk about. Huge, huge story. And then Kaepernick, huge story. Another big story. And the McVay story, it was somewhat of a big story, maybe something people talked about on Mondays. But it's not really a national sports story as much so. So the Astros scandal, biggest story in baseball right now. The Astros scandal, yes. So what the Astros were doing is, and this is the basis of it. So you know sign stealing in baseball, it goes back to 100 years ago. So the most basic form of sign stealing. And even now, the most basic form is hard to do. And the reason why is, you know, I watched baseball. I've watched baseball for years. Like I watched Steven Strasburg, Kurt Suzuki, no runners on or runner on first. Oh, 1, fastball, 2, curveball, 4, changeup. Those are Strasburg's 3 primary pitches, right? Well, runner gets on second. You try to look at the signs, and and then when there's a runner on second, you zoom in on TV, and the catcher does whatever signal there is. Say, calls a, I don't know, does 2 something, I don't know, and then, so I don't know what it is, so that's hard to detect, right? That is the type of sign stealing that's okay. Everybody does it, probably at all levels. And sure, there's so much more. Sure. If there's no runners on, and they give the sign, fastball away, no one, okay. But if they step away, and you can guess a fastball, maybe you say, oh, fastball away, okay, all right. That's basic sign stealing. You cannot prevent that. That's impossible. That's why teams do complicated signs that I cannot understand. And even before there's runners on base, signs get complicated, right? So what the Astros did, which was very interesting, was above and beyond. So what they did, and it probably worked when there was no runners on base, or maybe a runner on first. So what they did is, apparently what they did is they installed some sort of camera out there in center field. Okay, so you put a camera in center field, and apparently in the dugout, or whatever, the hallway between the dugout and the clubhouse, apparently you have another monitor. And apparently the camera zooms in on the catcher, right? So what the Astros did, and apparently also had a trash can as well. So what they did was, let's say there's a sign, right? Oh, so apparently what it was, if you heard one bang, like, let me give you an example. Let me try to recreate this, right? So let's say this happened. All right, maybe you heard it, maybe you didn't. Curveball, or whatever, changeup, slider, whatever, or changeup, okay, right, okay? If it was nothing, fastball, right? That's what it was. And maybe the Astros doing that. I think it was mostly well known in 2017, and I can read examples of that as we go on. So what happened is that the last 3 seasons, 2017 they won the World Series, 2018 they won 100 games, losing the LCS to the Red Sox in 5, and last year, 2019, my Washington Nationals beat them in Game 7 of the World Series. And that's why Washington had the great parade. And they didn't, but that's a whole nother episode. You can look at that on YouTube. So anyways, that happens. And that might explain their success. So when you know the pitch is coming, and it's not guaranteed success. I mean, I can know a fastball is coming, right? But even with Evan, like I saw in the videos, it's not like they had crushed home runs on every pitch, but it gave them an advantage. You knew what was coming and you knew what to expect, so you at least had an idea. Now, you can never look at the location of the pitch. You can never say, oh, fastball away. But maybe you can, see, okay, a fastball's coming. I know it's coming. Where is it? Oh, it's a little outside on max swing. Oh, it's right down the middle. Let me hit it. Oh, outside corner, good pitch hit. Okay. So you had a good idea. You had a big head start. You had a huge head start, right? So this was written in 2018, and Jeff Passan, well known for ESPN, but at the time was at Yahoo Sports, was basically explaining that the Indians warned the Red Sox about potential sign stealing. So in that series, you remember the Red Sox, I remember that Astros-Indians series, that was in 2018, very, very well. That series was not even close. It was a complete blowout. The Indians basically had no chance at all in that series. In Game 3, just it made the Astros just look like the far better team. That basically is what defined that entire series. Okay, so that is what happened then, at that point in time. Well, apparently, I guess the Red Sox got the warning since the Red Sox won that series in 5. So here's another story. Mike Fiers, who again is one of the better starting pitchers on the A's as of right now, and Mike Fiers at the time was an Astros starter, was on that 2017 team, and as soon as he got off that team, was actually non-tendered. I remember reading that now. So once he went to the Tigers, basically, so what he said to the Astros was unfair and told them, hey, get ready for this. The Astros do suspicious things, so be ready for it. And he probably told them what it was, and he said, I think, also in the article, I don't have the exact quotes, I am paraphrasing right now, but what happened was basically saying, oh, this is unfair, these Tigers guys, the Tigers are going to use more players than the Astros, because the Tigers are going to lose 100 games, are one of the worst teams in baseball, so they're going to use a lot more players than, say, what the Astros use. So they're going to have a bunch of players that, again, who would normally belong in AAA would play there. So you said a bunch of players were trying to make the team and stuff like that, and the Astros, as good as they are, were already trying to get even better. So that was unfair to them. Maybe those players were not succeeding at what they could have done because of what the Astros were doing. Here's a very good one. Danny Farquhar, who was a great story. Unfortunately, it was somewhat of a sad story. He's fine now. But anyways, at the time in 2017, he was a White Sox pitcher. And basically, he heard this noise, right? So let's just say he's pitching. Let me create this. All right? I'm about ready to throw a changeup. Throws the changeup. And then maybe threw a fastball later, doesn't hear a noise. All right, want to throw the changeup. Okay, throws the changeup. And then at the final time, what happened is, what he did is, all right, changeup, let's do this. That was a good changeup, and he stepped on that. Wait a minute, something's going on. Something suspicious is going on. So Danny Farquhar knew what was going on right away. So he knew what was going on. And I've seen the video of what was going on. I think the height of this was in 2017. I'm going to be completely honest. I've watched a lot of Astros games. I've watched them play a lot of games at Minute Maid Park in the regular season. And I knew almost nothing about it. Like, I did not know this was coming. This, which maybe I'm not totally surprised, but this kind of caught me by surprise in some ways or another, since I did not think this was coming. And maybe the day, they're a great team like the Patriots. Oh, wait a minute. So all the success they're trying to, as good as they were, they did things to make them even better. You know what? Sort of like the Patriots. Reminds me exactly of the Patriots and what happened. And the Patriots received punishments, nothing too severe, but they received some punishments to make sure they didn't do it again, and they haven't had any trouble since then. Obviously, the Deflategate, right? But okay. So, this is suspicious, and now it is possible. And what's going to happen is, and I'll get to this in a minute. So, it is possible that Alex Cora, now the Red Sox manager, and Carlos Beltran, now the Mets manager. Now, this was different, had something to do with the sign stealing. So, Cora was the bench coach, and Beltran was a player on the 2017 Astros, was a veteran. And what Beltran said is the Astros stole signs, but it was legal, and they said they'll watch hours and hours of videotape of the pitchers, right? So they didn't think they did anything wrong. They think they did legal stuff. So what's going to happen is A.J. Hinch, the Astros manager then and now, Alex Cora, then the bench coach, now the Red Sox manager, and Carlos Beltran, who was a player then now a manager, they'll be interviewed by the MLB, since they seem like the smartest mind. So there's talk that they might have come up with the strategy and they know the best about the strategy. So again, and I heard about this, I heard people talking about it. So what type of punishment will the Astros receive? Okay, what type of punishment will they receive? I honestly don't know what type of punishment they will receive. There could be multiple things. The Braves a few years ago had an international signing bonus scandal where they basically did illegal stuff and illegal things in signing bonuses, right? And John Cuppalella got banned for life. I don't think this happens with the Astros. Now, who gets in trouble? Is it Luno, who's in the front office people? Is it A.J. Hinch? Which, if these things, what will be interesting to see what the MLB asks about them. And they could be, and what proceeds after this. Since, again, do suspensions come, right? Do suspensions come? Whether Alex Cora is suspended for 40 games by the Red Sox, and A.J. Hinch said, "Oh, you're not managing this year." And maybe Beltran gets out of this since he was a player, and just does, and is out of this. So again, are individuals punished? Right? I don't think that happens. I think instead, and if this is true, and you know what happened if the Astros somehow got clear to this? I think this would make the rest of the league mad. And here's why I say this. The reason why I say this is feel like they got away with this. Really? You let them get away with this? Now this is going to happen all over again. Teams are going to keep doing that since maybe it's now impossible to catch people, which I don't think they will. Here's what you could do. I don't think you punish. I don't know if you want to punish the manager or whatever, since maybe they set it up, maybe they didn't. I don't know. So here's the thing. It was clear they did those trash can stuff. You cannot deny that. Mike Fiers, former player, is talking about that already. There's that sound. It is obvious. You cannot hide that, right? What I think they should do is they should be like with the Braves. Take away maybe your first round draft picks for the next 2 years. Anything that has to do with first round or second round pick. And prevent international bonus signings. Take away most of the international bonus signings, right? Do that. Do things like that to make sure that doesn't happen. And maybe Jeff Luhnow gets suspended for a half a season. I don't know. I don't know who gets suspended and how long it's going to be. I don't know what the punishments are going to be. But they're going to be something like that, and I think there will be punishments. And by the way, all this was from The Athletic. Ken Rosenthal wrote those 2 articles, and it was somebody else. I apologize to them for forgetting their name, but it was Ken Rosenthal and another writer. They did a great job of covering this, and they were the forefront. The Athletic does great coverage. In fact, that's where I read a lot of my stuff as I prep for shows, is from The Athletic. So that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. So that is it for today's show. I don't know if I'll come on next week or not. I don't know. Probably, maybe who knows? Maybe there'll be good stories to talk about. One thing I'm thinking about doing is I might do a follow-up show on the Rams, talking about the Rams-Bears game on on Monday to see what happens. So yeah, so things I'm gonna watch for, and I want to watch for as it goes on. Just kind of recap of what I saw as I let off with the Browns. What happens with the Myles Garret situation, and what happens with the Browns the rest of the year. Obviously, what do the Rams do? I'm very curious by that. What happens with Colin Kaepernick? Either gets signed or he doesn't. And what happens with the Astros? So all interesting things about that we could find more about, say, in the next coming days, weeks, certainly weeks, and perhaps with the Rams, maybe even a little over a month. So we'll see what happens. But thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.